right. How are y'all doing? Really? Come on. We just had 3 days of comics and fun, and for some of y'all drinking. Maybe there's some hangovers going on. How was y'all's weekend? There we go. We're just going to hang out for another minute or so. I'm waiting for one panelist. Greg Rucka is going to be a little late, but he'll be here too. And then we're going to talk about how life sucks sometimes and why that's really entertaining to read about. All right? And as you can see, we have got a packed panel, so we're going to do Q&A as well. So start thinking of questions if you know the books very well, if there's anything you've ever wanted to find out or pick their brains. We're going to line up in the center over here, and that's it. You guys know how Q&A works, right? Pretty much, this panel is about dystopias in science fiction and kind of why we read about these stories where things are going wrong. And why we want to read about those kind of things as opposed to happier subjects and things like that. I want to start by introducing our panelists. Let's see, we're going to start down on the end. Joe Harris and Martina Morasso, Great Pacific. Got a couple covers here for you. Hey. Joe, what can you tell us about Great Pacific?
Introductory-wise, or what's coming up? Or?
Introductory. What's the pitch?
Well, Great Pacific is about a young oil heir who throws away his life of inheritance and privilege to go out and settle the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, where he plants a flag and declares it his own sovereign country. He doesn't anticipate, though, that there are already various things living there, like mutated marine life, giant octopuses, and pirates, and hostile natives that live in outlying nearby islands that cause him grief. And so once he figures out how to survive on this giant toxic continent of garbage, he then attempts to build a nation upon it and has to deal with even more vile and even more mutant, in a different sense of the word, rogue nations and bad actors, and this makes the sort of deals you have to make sometimes to build a country.
All right, next up, we've got Greg Rucka, Eric Troutman. Greg writes Lazarus, Eric helps design it. And Greg, can you give us the elevator pitch for Lazarus?
Yeah, the 1% became the 0.00000000000000001%, and they won. They bought everything. You work for them now. That's it. That's the future. They own it all.
Let's see. Next up, we've got. Give me just a second with this laptop. We've got Prophet, Simon Roy, writer, co-artist, co-writer and artist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prophet is basically set in the far, far future where, before the story even happened, mankind had already turned into a horrible giant slave society, collapsed and disappeared, and all the alien slaves that they had brought to Earth have had a few thousand years just to, get comfy. And now humans are back and trying to kill all the aliens. So that's, yeah. Basically.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm done.
Sheltered, with Ed Brisson and Johnnie Christmas here in the middle.
Yes, Sheltered's basically, it's set present day. It's about a group of doomsday preppers or survivalists who sort of move into a commune to prepare for any sort of cataclysmic sort of end of world type scenario, and then it's about how they react when they believe that they're faced with this scenario in very brutal and sometimes upsetting ways.
Johnny, what can you tell us about this cover on the right?
That's one of the characters in Sheltered. He wasn't exactly supposed to be a character.
Yeah.
He just kind of, through character design, he just sort of started appearing more and more. Next thing you know, he became sort of prominent. It's just sort of this character's sort of inner life and the extremes in which he's willing to go to.
So we're going to get back to these covers because I like kind of the juxtaposition of horror and like pure fantasy, basically.
Sure, yeah.
But we've got Nick Pitarra, Manhattan Projects. Super designy covers. These look really cool. What can you tell us about the series?
The series is about, it's like a crazy sci-fi take on the Manhattan Projects. So all the scientists from the Manhattan Projects, Oppenheimer, Einstein, Feynman, Werner von Braun. It's just a crazy, over-the-top, kind of funny take, alternate reality version of what else they worked on. So if they were able to hide the atomic bomb, what else did they hide? And it's kind of just crazy, over-the-top fun.
You can kind of see an Einstein here, and also like the Russian space dog. So all these books are pretty different. Some of them aren't pure dystopias. Some are just kind of, we'll say, sad in a way. Like they tragic. That is the word. Thank you. But what's cool is that they're all about things going wrong in some way. Most stories are, but these are things like structurally go wrong. And I want to go back to Sheltered real fast. Militia people. What can you tell us about kind of their mindset and what led you to that story?
What initially led me to the story is I wanted to do a post-apocalyptic story and was sort of researching how people who are preparing for the end of the world would survive afterwards. Mm-hmm. And then that culture became so much more interesting to me, so got into it. Basically, I hate to, I don't want to paint everyone with like I don't want to generalize too much, but from the research I was doing about it and the people I talked to and stuff I was listening to, you get a lot of like a huge distrust of the government, so they're trying to completely just move off the grid and live without that sort of structure, without government interference. And sort of I feel like with that sort of distrust, especially when you remove them, you know, put them in their own society where they're feeding off the distrust of the outside world, when you start to see that encroach on them a bit, how they react. So, you know, but it's a big thing. Last decade seems to really be growing sort of doomsday prepper culture, and it's incredibly interesting. I wouldn't be able to hack it if any of that happened. I would be first dead, for sure.
And mistrusting the government, things like that, it's based in kind of, we're supposed to trust our government is one of those things that we're taught from a very young age. Often it turns out to not be true, which I think is reflected very well in Lazarus, because that comes from like capitalism winning and everyone else losing.
There is no government in
Yeah,
Lazarus. I mean,
like, I mean, it gets replaced by essentially economics.
I'd even argue that Lazarus is a post-economy.
yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, go on.
Yeah, no, Eric, elaborate.
There's no, you know, money isn't a thing, right? Currency is resources. And resources, anything from food, medicine, technology to, you know, available labor is a resource. You know, we're all resource meat in that setting, which is really comforting every time I open up one of the scripts.
Well, but I mean that is the nature of it. Once you own everything, you don't need money. Mm-hmm. You know, nobody. I think it's interesting that, you know, we're set 8 is going to be out next month. You've yet to be yet to see somebody going, here's $10 for a thing. In 8, you're actually going to see the first transactional. Well, actually, the second transactional dealings in the series. I mean, in 6. There's the whole bit. Anybody reading it? Yay! Thank God. I love you. Please never leave us. In 6, there's the sequence with Emma, right, as she's distracting the guards. That's transactional. Mm-hmm. I will offer you my body in exchange for some water and food. And the guards are blasé about it. This sort of thing happens all the time. And in 8, the Barretts have finally joined the Pilgrim convoy that's heading to Denver for the lift. And the convoy has its own economy, and Casey, who they still have 2 horses, is able to basically use the horse to run up and down the length of this huge procession, and she is bartering. You know, I can take this to this person. I can get, you know, I mean, there's a sequence in that issue where you get half of a conversation where a guy's trying to get her to take a flashlight in exchange for, I think, a water run, and she's like, it's no good to me without batteries, man. It is you know, these families own it all. They have it all. And in that sense, we have become post-capitalist, and in that sense become pre-capitalist. It's reverted to feudalism in a lot of ways.
It's not an economy anymore, it's an ecosystem.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a good way to put
way
it.
to put it.
Nick, can you tell us a little bit about, so the Manhattan Project, it can be dark, like horrible things happen to people all the time, but something about it still makes me kind of laugh a little bit. Can you talk about doing kind of balancing those two elements?
I think the vehicle for the humor is probably the art style. My art style is kind of cartoony, and so a lot of the horrible things are like easily swallowed and accepted visually. I draw kind of gross and silly, so I think that plays to why it's kind of awful, but also kind of humorous at the same time. I think generally the tone is very dark, but also very silly. That's about it.
Simon, we were talking earlier about, like, you also have a kind of a gross, dark art style. Like, everything's very wet. And I mean that in the most positive sense. Like, I mean, look at these pages. That's like nothing else you see out there. Why does Prophet look like this instead of, like this sleek Star Trek type of design?
I really like biology and like thinking about the natural processes of the world, the lines of causality. And so when I'm thinking of like really, indescribably far in the future, I feel like it's better to have something really gross and disconcerting because it's, instead of just familiar people in jumpsuits, it's this whole disgusting world, where you're living inside buildings made of human flesh, kind of. I feel like I'm getting sidetracked now.
No, keep going.
Yeah, basically just like the world is gross and wet and like palpitating a lot of the time, and I enjoy drawing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Joe, you deal with, in Great Pacific, biology and kind of the way that man has ruined the earth a little bit is kind of a big part of it.
Yeah, of course. We like to throw in for fun and for horror, different mutated creatures. When Chaz, our protagonist, first arrived there, he encountered this giant octopus that had been mutated and into something quite monstrous and incredibly intelligent and filled with feelings for him. And we like to throw in lots of things. Like in the most recent issue, we had that three-eyed frog, rather, and we've had two-headed seagulls, and that they actually stock a game reserve with. And it's horrific, but it's interesting, and it's kind of cute in its way, I suppose. I mean, we have a good time doing it, but I don't think anyone would be really pleased if there was a preponderance of this. So.
Yeah. And a lot of these series are based in things that are happening today. Great Pacific, it's the garbage patch in the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, we've extrapolated a little bit on a lot on the reality. I mean, the Great Pacific garbage patch is really this field of debris, most of it particulate, where plastic and stuff that ends up in the ocean gets trapped by currents in the North Pacific Ocean. And we've envisioned it. Scientists say it's twice the size of Texas. So we've kind of taken that idea and made it this mass of plastic bits that have been sort of crushed together to form this continent that Chaz settles and plants his flag on, and which drives Martin Marazzo, my collaborator, crazy when he has to draw that every month. But yeah, horrific.
And so for the panel in general, how important is the research? Like, are you married to getting it 100% right, or do you just pick a spot, that's the truth that you're going to work with for now, and you'll extrapolate from there?
I think that sums it up well for us. I mean, just a little truth, and we stretch it not just for, not just to have fun. I mean, we're doing something expressionistic with it. I mean, we've got a point to make, I suppose. So. The truth is horrible, and I think that even when you extrapolate like this, you can still shine a light on that and make it entertaining. And
Ed and Johnny, what about you guys? Like, how important? What aspect of research are you guys married to the most?
Well, before starting it, I did a lot of the one thing that's great about sort of living in the age of podcasts is that preppers just a ton of prepper podcasts, and I just for weeks that's all I listened to. And so just to try and get the voices down, get that sort of thing. But we did quite a bit of research leading up to it to see like what sort of what they would be living in, what they would stock their bunkers with, what sort of vehicles they might have, all that sort of stuff. And so yeah, once we use that for the setting, and yeah, I think we don't really push too far from it. Like, yeah, we just set setting and just went basically.
Yeah, a lot of the research is in terms of the visuals, just trying to find out where they would live, what kind of things they would use, try and get the smell of the country, even if you can get that in there, carabiners and trailers and what kinds of trailers, and maybe people who have lived there longer would have old trailers because they were probably poorer than people came later and they got the nice FEMA trailers, that sort of thing. So there's lots of little subtle things, and the research helps greatly with that.
And Eric, your role really is bringing realism to the comic. Like,
I don't know if that's actually true. It's
Yeah.
more an outlet for my OCD. A lot of what I end up doing on Lazarus is responding to just this incredible barrage of nightmare fuel emails from Greg.
Yeah.
Like, hey, so and so's got an atom bomb now. Oh, awesome! I'm gonna go scream into the night. And on the visual side of it, that's where I tend to do a lot of the research.
Yeah.
He's more the geopolitics guy, and I'm like, well, I need the logo to look pretty, but also make sense. So having me do a bunch of the family crests, like Michael Lark, the artist on the book, who's phenomenal, he designed the Carlisle crest, and that kind of establishes a tone for what they should look like. So when I'm asked, hey, we need a logo for this other company, like Greg will write a little bio of what they did and where they came from, and so
This is why they're evil.
yeah, basically, I'll get like 3 paragraphs, and then I'll look at that and go, okay, well, Carragher, for example, started out life as an 18th century Australian mining company. So how did they advertise stuff? So you go looking for that, and then what element of that got turned into a brand they put on their horses that in the 30s turned into their logo, that in the 50s got changed to this, and evolve it into this kind of militarized, creepy, like pretty cynical, terrible militaristic crest that they now wear proudly as they subjugate you. So
It's funny, we sell the Carlisle patch, right? And I've taken to saying to people when they buy them, I say, congratulations, you're now part of the problem. So I think we better come up with the free patch. Should be the next one. Say, congratulations, you're part of the solution, or at least a different problem.
let me ask, if we do that, do we have to barter those instead of selling them?
No, we are family.
anybody got questions? Microphone in the middle, you can talk right into it. Nobody?
Oh,
Wow.
come on, come play.
Go for it. Nobody's that hungover. You guys have questions.
I'm pretty hungover, so
We're
it's
all
okay.
fine. Come on, you can do it.
My question's for Nick. So in the past Manhattan Projects issues, you were killing off a couple of comic creators.
Oh, yeah.
I was just wondering, do you laugh your ass off when you're drawing those pictures, or are you having fun, or?
Yeah, so me and John work Marvel style for a lot of the scripts. So sometimes we'll say there's guards, and if there's just the word guards in the script, I'll just start drawing friends in the book. So recently I killed from Chew, Rob Guillory, and John Lehman.
Right.
And then I killed Jeff Lemire, Greg Capullo, and Scott Snyder,
That's,
which is really cool.
Like
This
pretty
page here.
pretty brutally too.
Oh yeah, awfully.
They get
I'm
mowed
trying
down.
to. Originally, I did all my Skype, like when I draw, we had a big Skype group of artists. I killed all of them off, but they weren't popular enough. No one noticed. So we got more popular now, and they had to get more brutal. So yeah, it was just fun. It was really cool too because those guys are like fans of the book, which why I put them in there. And it was really nice just that they even know the book was cool. So then I was put them in there, pander a little bit, get more Twitter followers.
What's your Twitter account?
It's just Nick Pitarra now. It used to be Nicky Poo, but that wasn't working. So.
More questions? Right here.
Greg. Brian Michael Bendis has talked a lot about how much you research. And I'm kind of wondering, like, as far as research to writing, what's the ratio there?
Oh, God. What is the rate? Research never stops. writing is abandoned, but research never stops. I had a novel come out a couple years ago called Alpha, and I was asked by the publisher to do a blog post for the website, and I wrote an essay called Sinking the Titanic, which is about the research process for me. I tend to think about it like an iceberg. You know, you see 1/10 of the research, but the other 9/10 feeds that portion that you see. You know, if good writing is picking the right detail, then a wealth of research will ideally inform the choice of detail. That said, there's so much stuff in Lazarus. We're 7 issues out, and there's so much I've gotten wrong already. You know, stuff where I was like, okay, this would be the technology. Literally a week after we had talked about CRISPR as a gene-developing stem cell technology, there's a whole new one now. You know, I mean, it is happening so fast that at a certain point, research loses its specificity. So you broadly, at least for my purposes, I'm dealing sort of broadly with a lot of things, and that all goes into the hopper. But I mean, I wish I could say, well, it's 30% to 70, or it is a constant process. I get emails every morning. You know, I have subscription services. Stuff comes in. You know, I've got Google alerts and paid services and other research things that I actually go through and read through. And sometimes it's a quick read, and sometimes I'll be like, oh, what is this thing? This thing in Science Daily came up. I'm going to chase it down. I spend on average about an hour to 2 hours every day on my news feeds. So,
Go for it.
Hey, the name's Niles. I mean, it's kind of on the same lines. And this is for all of you. And as far as like how current events sort of play into like elements of the stories you guys bring in, because I do a podcast we call the Dystopia Boys, by the way. But there's all these things like robotics and economical issues, and like all these things just keep coming up and keep changing. So I mean, like, how much does that sort of play into, like, you find something, add it into the story, or like take a broad idea that you found and sort of go off of that? I mean, how much does current events sort of play into what goes into the next issue, or
a lot, but I already
yeah.
answered one. I was
Exactly.
hoping somebody jump
Yeah.
in. Come on.
Yeah, in ours, they're cut off from society, so they've completely cut themselves off from news or anything. The one interesting thing, though, is that in our book, the thing that they fear is that the Yellowstone Park supercaldera is going to erupt, which is something I'd come across through research about a year and a half ago that I thought was really cool. And just over the last couple months, there's been a ton of fear.
Really cool. I think terribly horrifying.
Terribly horrifying. But I had no idea there was a huge volcano under Yellowstone Park before starting the research.
Active.
And now there's been all this fear the last couple months, found it or not, that it's actually happened, is going to happen, whether I believe it or not. But it's been in the news quite a bit, so that's not necessarily something that informs the story, but something that is a weird coincidence, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's on the lines of the story and the story you're
Yeah.
trying to tell, yeah.
Joe, for Great Pacific, how much, like, once you got the basic idea down, are you still pulling from things that have been evolving in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I get, whenever something is in the media regarding how the oceans are distressed, or specifically the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, I have so many friends and people who read the book who send me these links. So I do pay attention, and it's a departure point, but I'd like to think in examining what this character does in this situation he's sort of thrust himself into, it illuminates something about the truth that's going on environmentally. I mean, one thing we really wanted to do when we launched this book is not to preach, because I think you can get that message through our character. He's kind of a bit of an asshole sometimes. I mean, he doesn't necessarily want to save the planet. He wants to profit off of consolidating this place and owning it. And so we use it as a departure point, but I think that we still shine some light on the original point that we started at.
And Greg, I think Lazarus is pretty political, at least in the. Can you talk about that some? I know you have really strong feelings on that front.
Well, yeah, I mean, Eric uses the phrase nightmare fuel, and that's where this came out of. I mean, I was in a really, really dark place in my life. I was terribly, terribly depressed, and I was listening to the news, which is always a good combination.
Next time, throw in some liquor.
Yeah, and then a couple live rounds, and we're done.
Yeah.
And I mean, the economic situation sucks, guys. It sucks. And like I said, this Oxfam report came out 6 weeks ago. 86 individuals own this, what is it, more wealth than, 1/3 of the world's poorest? 86 people. 86 people. How many people are in this room? I mean, that's effed up. That's effed up. And it's not getting better. It's not going to get better. I thought us going, there were 16 families at the Macau courts. Ha, ha, ha. That'll never end. What do you mean there are 84 now? You know what I mean? I do think this is, look, you can't write this book and not be, I couldn't approach this the way you approach Great Pacific. There's an agenda here. It feeds the world. You don't have to agree with it. I don't think you will not enjoy the book if you think Rucka's wrong, because it is a fantasy. It is an iteration of a possible future. But that said, I think that, I think the biggest problem in this country and in the world is that capitalism is grossly out of control. It is not, it's no longer the system that it once was. It is predatory capitalism, and it is not just destroying the planet, or not just destroying individuals, it is destroying the planet. It really is. And I think, there's going to be an iterative moment. It's going to break. One way or the other, it's going to break.
Thanks, guys.
Go for it.
Yeah.
If I could just interject for a second, too. One of the things I find really interesting about Lazarus and what attracted me to the project when Greg said, hey, come play, I think the best illustration of how capitalism has gone out of control, as Greg puts it, is, there were the robber barons of our early capitalism, but they also built schools and museums and colleges, and these are families that have put nothing back that does not directly benefit them. And I think that right there, the fact that none of that is visible, which leads me to believe none of that's there, is the most obvious example of how far it's gone.
There's no philanthropy. There's privatization. There was an article in the New York Times Magazine, I think last week, about the privatization of science now. And that's exactly what we were doing in Lazarus. I mean, that's exactly what we're doing. And I had an argument with somebody very early on. I did an interview, and they said, oh, no, that's not the way it's going to work, because these sort of developments of technology and science, they have to be publicly funded. And I was like, you are so high. I mean, you are so high. The amount of money that's required to do the research now can only be provided by these people who have the money, which means they're going to own the product. And if they own the product, why the hell would they share it with you? Right? If I figure out a way to live until I'm 250 by gene therapy, you think I'm going to give that to you for free in this society? I mean, do you really believe that somebody would do that? And do you believe that the individual who says, I will do that, would survive? I mean, they won't. This is where we are now. So. But I'm not passionate about it.
Next question.
Okay, hi. My question's for
perfect.
Joe. I love Great Pacific. I think it's compelling, just the story of how Chaz is trying to acquire a sovereign nation and do all the, that stuff. But at what point during the storytelling did you decide, the scientific alchemy of transforming plastic to solids and just even the serpent monster or the octopus, etc. At what point did you find that that's where I could go and it could still be service to Chaz and everything else?
Well, that came out of early on in the book when he throws away this life of inheritance and privilege. He steals this technology from the oil mega corporation that his family built And it's essentially this technology that can remediate plastic down into the the petroleum byproducts that it's made from, and then further into water. So it's a bit of fantasy that this exists, but I wanted him to take something valuable from the company on his way out the door that would lead to him being hunted. And so that was definitely a plot device early on, and now it allows them to terraform this place. So it's, again, some fantasy, but as this goes on, what I wanted to do is reveal that he has no intention of cleaning up this mess, which is what some people assumed, I think, when we solicited the book and when it first came out. He's interested in building it into something for himself, and he could make the case that it's better than letting it fester untended, and perhaps he's doing a better job as a steward of this than some other interests might. But infusing it, that just gave us something technological to use, both as a device early on to have him steal something valuable, and now, again, this is a big part of their building the society out on this thing.
So you have like the technological, and then you also have like this like the tribes that are existing, and like I said, like the octopus monster that seems to favor Chaz. Like where?
That's just born from love of adventure. That's Jules Verne. That's it doesn't. One of the things people tend to always gravitate towards is the octopus, Yalafat, which is based on this Pacific Islander myth. About it's basically it's a name that comes from the creation myth that a lot of various cultures share, and that's just pure adventure stuff. And it seemed, when I was coming up with this, it was just one of those elements that popped into my head as this was coming together and seemed to fit.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go for it.
Okay. So first of all, I have not read any of your stories.
They're for sale at the Image Booth 212.
But I do love this, and I do like this type of fiction, which I can't pronounce. But and I read a lot of it. And then I sat through all your pitches, and there was some truth in each one. Like, there is something really effed up in your comic, but true. And then there's something really effed up in your comic, but true. There's a resonation in each one of them. And it reminded me of why I like the end of Fight Club. It's like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to blow this shit up. But it'll be okay. It's an act of terrorism, but there was something we were trying to accomplish. There was a plan in place. So I guess my question, to get to it, is in your stories, in your agenda, or what the truth that you have in each of your stories, is there a plan to fix it? Is it going to get better? That's why we read these stories. It's like, yes, it's messed up, but eventually it will get better. Or are you really just tearing it all down?
Who wants to go first?
Well, you're asking how it's going to end. So.
Well, I don't want to buy the book, so.
Okay. Well. Yeah. Okay. We got a Band-Aid for that one?
In our book, our characters do decide to make a stand to make things better. However, the metric that they're using is probably not. We probably wouldn't agree with.
Well, okay, let me clarify it. I guess I'm not saying don't tell me the end. What I'm saying is your intent. And when you were writing these books, is your intent, like, I'm tearing this down, but I'm tearing it down for a reason, so I can show or illustrate a problem, and then I'm going to present this, solution to the end. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, guys. Eventually maybe the garbage will get better or whatever. So I guess that's what I'm asking is, what was the intent kind of on it? It's, I guess, clarifying part of my question.
I think we were, with ours, good intentions. And I'll sometimes, it's best to consider all options instead of shooting from the hip and just kind of being pure of heart. And, well, pure of heart probably doesn't. Yeah. But I think your question probably is more relevant to kind of what Greg and Joe Reason why Nick's doing
I mean, our protagonist thinks he's doing the right thing, and he keeps encountering far worse people that he is the good guy in those situations, and he does care. It's just it's hubristic, you know. It's not pure. It's not necessarily noble, even though I think he would probably consider himself to be. So, I mean, yeah, he has a plan, and I have an ending in mind, and I think that it does strive for something positive. There's just a lot of hell to pay to get there.
Nick, how about the Manhattan Projects?
If you read the Manhattan Projects, basically, it's like the opposite of hope. It's just everyone. It's just us making. Yeah, it's just us making everyone awful for the sake of it, and just having fun with it. So it's not. There's not really light. I mean, there's fun stuff in there, and us poking fun at things, but there's no hope.
But you're talking to a group of people that for a career have voluntarily elected to sit in darkened rooms at keyboards or at drawing tables. We're not statesmen or scientists. Our solutions are probably not going to be any better. So I think
Gene Roddenberry.
But that's,
I would argue that Gene Roddenberry's his vision of the Federation is almost as dystopian as some of the stuff here. They can't have conflict. That's how change happens. Stagnation isn't exactly great either. But I think based as I'm not writing Greg's book, obviously. I'm a reader, and I've read everything these guys are talking about. So as kind of an outside reader, I think the intent to address the way you've asked the question seems to be to point light at things that these statesmen and smart people that don't sit in darkened rooms can fix. I think that's probably more what you're asking.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Look, the first purpose is always entertainment. I want to tell a good story. It is meant to be illustrative. I want to shine a light. From a narrative standpoint, yes, there is an inherent dramatic. You are asking the inherent dramatic question of Lazarus, which is this going to get better? Can this system change? That is the tension of the story. Can it change is not necessarily the same thing as asking, can it change for the better? Will it change? You know, the story of Lazarus in the main, if there's a core story, is whether or not Forever is going to become the agent of change in this world. That's really the question. And I can't answer that yet. You know, it wouldn't be very good if the answer was no.
Okay, I'll buy your book.
But to imply that the change that she brings is going to be necessarily positive, that's a different question.
thank you.
Thank you.
It's an excellent question.
Quick one. As far as dystopians go, I mean, what are kind of key things that you think is important to your stories, or just a dystopian story in general? What are sort of like key themes that you think are?
Do you mean like what makes it feel right, like a dystopia?
Yeah, I mean,
or-
yeah. As far as being a dystopian or telling a dystopian tale, what's important to you guys? As far as
Dirt, rubble, filth, rust, disease,
besides the basic things,
bodily fluids. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yours is so far in the future. You mentioned that everything's wet and gross and palpitating, but what about like the mood of Prophet?
I like the idea of there being a balance between the familiar and the really disconcerting. In dystopians and in basically like all science fiction that I like, it's recognizing what's the same and then connecting that to all the other crazy shit that's going on in the story, and that kind of thing. I don't know.
I think with Sheltered, you guys, I mean, we're working with teenagers. We know teens. We know like they tend to be very. You said pure of heart earlier, but I think it's like single-minded. Yeah, like once they pick a position, they're stuck with it. And yeah. Can you guys talk about that a little bit? Sort of the motivations of the characters and why that fits the dystopian setting. Did I stump you?
Dystopians are generally extreme, and teenagers, especially their inner life, tend to be sort of a a battleground of the extremes. You know, they're one day they're like into Christian rock, the next day they're into heavy metal and God knows what else. But yeah, so I think that's kind of I think I've lost the plot.
Well, like what we have here, like the teenagers of sort of, I don't know if anyone's read it. I'm going to spoil the first issue for everyone here. The teenagers think that there's not enough supplies for everyone to survive, so they kill their parents, so that the teenagers can go on and survive this cataclysmic event. And they rationalize it like throughout the thing. And I think that's the thing is that they're teenagers who believe that they're ready to be adults who are not necessarily there yet. And they're able to rationalize it throughout the series that they did this because this is actually what their parents would have wanted them to do. This is what their parents kind of taught them to do to survive, that it's them, for yourself. And so I think that was kind of the interesting thing for us writing is when they're trying to be adults and clearly do not have the tools to be adults. So.
Hi there. This is a question generally for the whole panel. Do you find that, is there anything that you guys think you do in terms of staying positive generally in life, given that you guys write such sort of you're involved in creating such sort of dark worlds?
How do you cope with the research, basically?
Yes, thank you.
I think a lot of it is just like fixing it on the page is part of the process, because you're externalizing all the built up anxiety of the universe onto the page. Or at least that's maybe for me.
I find writing is sort of like exorcism. It's like I'm a pretty happy dude in life, but I write the darkest stuff when I'm actually writing, and it's like it's just how I get it all out of my system, I think. And so I never find it drags me down.
And we put it on to you guys.
Yes.
I'll be honest. Sometimes it's cathartic, like I was saying, but I've done research that I've never been able to put down. There's stuff that I've researched for novels and so on that I'm never going to be able to leave behind. And I wrote a book. I did research for one of my novels, and I had a conversation with my wife, who's also a writer, Jennifer Van Meter, about a year ago about it, and she pointed out to me, she was like, I see the damage that research did 4 years on. So there's a saying, so that is known cannot be unknown. There are certain things, once you see them, you can't let them go. That's not the answer you wanted, is it?
Yeah, stay positive, man. Come on.
So I'll go to Eric's answer, which is sweet, sweet scotch.
Captain Marvel, what do you got for us?
Okay, so I was hearing you talk about the book Lazarus, and I've read Great Pacific, but that's the only one I've read out of this group. But when you were talking about giving that elevator pitch, it actually kind of reminded me of this TV show in Canada called Continuum. And there's the main part of Continuum is a time travel thing with terrorists, and it's a completely different thing going on. But basically, their world is all run by corporations as well, but it's very, very slick and very, very filled with technology. And the main character is completely bought into this, and she's part of the problem. And she's going after these terrorists that are trying to destroy the corporations because they think that those are bad, and obviously that they are. And she finally starts to slowly learn, all the things that have been held under her eyes because she was a sheep for so long. But I rarely see dystopian, work where, everything's slick and nice, like Blade Runner and things like that. But it's usually from the aspect of when you do technology stuff like that, and I guess post economies, they're usually done from a very slick sci-fi kind of way, and you have a character who's been involved in the situation who slowly learns and tries to take down the system. And a lot of the gritty post-apocalyptic things are very like zombies, anything where there's been a massive disease and stuff. And I was wondering why you chose to go with looking at kind of the peons in that situation with Lazarus and go from there.
Because I wanted that sense of economic disparity. The families have everything. So yeah, they get slick, they get nice, they get clean because they can make you clean it. They don't have to give you anything. And that was it. It came down to what Eric pointed out before. It's that issue of philanthropy. what would the families spend their money on and their resources on? They would spend the barest minimum required to keep you all from taking up pitchforks and coming after them. And they would do everything they can to keep you from even knowing that you could pick up a pitchfork and come after them. And that's why. It's just, it's greed. It's all about greed and resource management. Yeah.
Unstoppable, rampant greed. Like, cannot undersell that.
Yeah, they want it all.
All right, we got about 5 minutes left, so we're going to try to do the next 3 questions. Hope, maybe. We'll see.
Dystopian stories can be really rife with tropes and cliches, and I was wondering, for all of you, if that's something you're consciously trying to avoid or embrace, or if you try to just avoid wondering because it's been done before.
We lucked out because ours is before any apocalypse has happened. So we can live in the real world and we can kind of anticipate these things as our characters are trying to anticipate these things. So hooray us.
I think cliches tend to arise from things that are, what a cliche is a truth that's been so often repeated that it becomes a shorthand and it's lost its resonance. So, you know, the way you avoid cliche is by being honest in your stories.
So I suppose I have kind of a depressing question.
Really? Yeah.
The thing is, when I was little, I loved Dystopia because it was so outside of the norm. And it was weird and it was alien. And now as an adult, I'm looking at Dystopia and going, oh, that's a little too close to home.
Yeah.
Because I'm one of the people that is kind of looking at the way our government is set up and the way that the world is set up and going, oh, we could be there in like 30 years. Crap.
10.
So, or 10. But what do you think you would do if our world actually started becoming more like comics, more like 1984, for example? Where would you guys go? You know,
Isn't
because
that
then you're
already-
writing truth.
Aren't we already there? Like I don't see, it's just gonna happen and we're gonna be there.
The new regime is going to need propaganda writers. So.
I, for one, welcome our alien overlords. Yeah.
I'm glad we got at least one laugh on this
Thank
panel.
God.
Kids comics, yeah.
So my question is just regarding how you settled upon your individual ideas for the dystopias that you focused on, because there are so many different options, so many different ways that you could go, and each of you chose something so unique. I think we got a pretty good sense from Greg and from the Lazarus Project that it was the social issue that really they chose to fixate on. But I'm just wondering, what other ideas were you kind of kicking around, or was it always, I'm going to write a story about this, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to focus on? So how did you come to the decision on focusing on the dystopias you chose?
Well, I mean, the reality of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch blew my mind when I first heard about it, like when most people hear about it. And for me, imagining it as this continent was just something that did come to mind, and the different sort of geographical features it would have just sort of manifested pretty quickly in my imagination. But once I started reading more about it, there were certain buzzwords, certain almost metadata-like things that would come up, like the fact that it is twice the size of Texas, and that got me thinking that our protagonist would be a Texan who, and I think Texas, I think oil and gas industry, and that started to feed into this. And for me, it was very organic. Just going through even the cursory research, it all started to it was just one of those things where it just started to pop up on the surface of my brain, and it came together pretty easily.
I think I can remember the specific moment where I thought it would be interesting to do a pre-apocalyptic thing where I mentioned earlier I was researching because I had an idea. I wanted to do a post-apocalyptic type of story. And so I was reading all these books, and I was watching, there's a National Geographic show called Doomsday Preppers. And there's one episode where they're in Alberta, and there's a couple who have been preparing, and they were going to buy a gun because they want to have a gun for when it happens, and they brought their 6-year-old daughter to the gun range when they bought the gun to try out the gun with her. And I have at that time had a 6-year-old daughter. She's now 7, but that floored me. I just couldn't believe that they were putting a gun in this. You know, obviously TV is a little bit sensationalized, even if it's meant to be sort of documentary style. But that's when the wheel started turning, and I really started delving more into that sort of culture. And then, you know, it just came from Johnny and I having a conversation about what we wanted to do, and sort of spun out from there.
Cool. So we are actually out of time. So can we get a round of
Thank you.
applause for our panel? All right. And y'all have a good evening. We'll see you at the next convention.